does all the food that we eat come from? Join us on our journey as we uncover where these interesting gourmets come from all around the world with our one and only Chef Matt on 맛 대 맛. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
반갑습니다.
반갑습니다.
Are you enjoying the monsoon season?
I am. I'm not in. Like I really loved yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Just like the torrential rain. It's something. It just felt like I think I've said. I think I've said this before. Like I don't necessarily enjoy the rain in the sense that I don't want to be caught out in the rain without an umbrella. I don't
Right.
like getting soaked wet. But if I'm inside and I don't have to drive anywhere, just that hearing that torrential rain, it feels right. You
That's
know,
true.
한국의 여름이면은, it's like
맞아요.
the 펑펑 내리는, like
맞아요.
it's the sound of the summer.
Yeah, and it feels good too.
Sure, and so like today we no rain.
Not at all.
It was actually pretty cool too. It was like 27
Yes.
degrees.
Yeah.
So it's funny, right? We have this kind of like saying in our house, like when it comes to like this time of the year, especially nowadays. Like I think over the past couple of years, monsoon season has been kind of intermittent. So it's like 내일 비 안 온다. 올 건데 안 올 수도 있어. Because like there's this one time, right? Like I opened up my weather app, it didn't refresh, so it said it wasn't going to rain, and then it said it was going to rain once it refreshed, and then I saw 20% chance to rain.
Yeah.
So no, it's not going to rain, but it is going to rain, but it might not rain.
You just never know.
No,
I
you
mean,
really don't.
hour by hour it changes. I mean, minute by minute it seems like.
Even depending on what side of the city you're on right now. I think earlier last month rather, we had these like really hyper localized rains
맞아요.
where it'd rain in like 잠실, but it'd be sunny in 여의도.
Which isn't so far away.
Yeah, no,
maybe
it
max
doesn't.
like 20 kilometers
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
And if
yeah.
you're driving, you can see the sporadic activity of rain. We're getting a couple message. 환장님. Hi, Punita 출첵이요. HS, also is checking in. So thanks to you guys who are tuning in all over the world. Let us know how you guys enjoy the rain or not. But away from the weather, or sometimes along with weather, let's get to our food.
That's right. And we're not talking about food. We're talking about drinks.
Oh.
If you caught our episode last week, we're talking about refreshing beverages. And this time we're going to be talking about, expand a little bit more on that and talk about some things we didn't get to talk about. Tea and coffee.
Tea and coffee. There are two types of people in the world, and they're like categorized by tea people and coffee people. Even if you don't think you're a tea person, there's so many different types of teas that you actually do enjoy without knowing. All right, so let's get to our question of the day, shall we?
That's right. And the question is, which country produces the most tea in the world?
Ooh. Oh, interesting. 어느 나라가 가장 많은 차를 생산하나요? Is that the question?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. It's a very easy answer until you start overthinking it. Just go with your gut.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Wait,
go.
I don't know.
Yeah, right? That's it. You already started overthinking
Yes,
it.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, because I want to say India, but maybe it's China. Or maybe it's... Yes.
Where's all this tea coming
Where's
from?
all the tea
Who
coming
knows?
from?
Yeah, it might be one of those things that, like, you know, did you know that, like, 98% of the world's tea actually comes from Tajikistan? You know,
Whoa, does it?
maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah, like, sometimes we have no idea where these things come from.
I mean, that's true. Like with coffee beans as well. It's like random countries that you wouldn't necessarily think are coffee countries.
I'll tell you this, like, it all has to do with, like, elevation and temperature and
climate.
So, I don't know if that helps, honestly.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to talking about tea.
Yeah, and let's talk about tea in Korea.
Okay.
So Korea is not as big of a tea culture as you might think it is, and there are a couple of reasons for this. So tea from tea leaves, we talked about teas like 보리차 and 옥수수 수염차 last week, like teas that aren't made from the tea leaf. This week we're going to talk about only teas from the tea leaf. So tea leaf tea came in Korea from the 6th or 7th century. They were brought over from China by Buddhist monks. And this is something that kind of was happening all over the world around this time. You know, there would be scholars or explorers that would kind of travel the earth, you know, go along, you know, say like the Silk Road or along the Pacific Rim or, you know, later across the oceans.
Oh, okay.
And they bring with them these things and they'd share them.
Right.
And so as a result, tea was brought by Buddhist monks and was initially only for royalty, priests, military, other high-ranking members of society. And it always kind of maintained this strong tie to Buddhism. And so in the Goryeo dynasty, we would see tea being used as an offering to the spirits of nature, such as mountains and rivers.
Oh, okay.
During this period, we would also see the introduction of 차례. It's an offering to ancestral spirits during New Year's and
맞아요.
harvest then. And so this was kind of like the period where tea became the people's drink. You know, the Goryeo dynasty. This is later on, and this is the point where it starts to get much more popular, and it becomes kind of the de facto beverage at this point.
Right. And I was quite surprised that you said that it was initially like the rich person's drink.
Everything new. During
Everything new.
pre-modern era, anything new that would come to a country was only for the rich at first.
그렇겠네요.
Pretty much, because it wasn't available. Like, think about even 10 years ago, right? Like before the advent of such 편한 직구.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things where you could only buy it if you could really afford it.
That's
right? Certain snacks. Perfect example. So one of our friends just came back from 출장 from Paris.
Uh-huh.
She brought back these really, really nice French butter cookies, sablé cookies.
Oh, nice.
And then I didn't have the heart to tell her, you can buy this on the grocery apps.
That's
now.
right. 맞아요.
And so this is what happens over time. Some things are just only very exclusively
That's true.
for a certain class, and then they become available to anyone.
맞아요.
However, afterwards, in the Joseon dynasty, there was a shift from Buddhism to Confucianism. And this was the point where tea made its decline in Korea. And it's because during the 14th century, tea is really strongly tied with Buddhism.
Uh-huh.
And in order to kind of replace Buddhism with Confucianism as the de facto kind of school of thought, tea kind of also went away as well.
I see.
And as a result, it never really kind of bounced back from that.
That's really interesting that a particular beverage can be so connected with religion. Because I feel food and religion, maybe. Like kosher foods,
That's true.
halal.
And I think that's part of it, right? I think, kosher and halal, I think, are two really good good examples of this. You have to keep in mind that in pre-20th century, most of the world, religion was a much larger cultural and political factor in everyone's daily life. And things especially kosher laws, are necessarily just there for the sake of being there, but because kind of law and culture were so intertwined into this religion is part of the reason why dietary aspects are also kind of 묶여d with religion.
Yeah, I guess so. But it just seems like such a simple thing because halal and kosher is how you prepare the meat.
Right.
And there could be a lot of rituals that go to that. But I guess you said, it did come with the chare, which is another ritual as well. So.
And so nowadays, cut to modern times, tea is nowhere near as popular as it was, pre-Joseon dynasty. And nowadays, you're honestly much more likely to eat tea rather than drink tea in Korea.
Eat tea?
Because I feel like tea from tea leaves. Let's make that, because things against mate cha, 옥수수 수염차, 보리차, all 헛개차 are all very, very popular convenience store soft drinks and beverages. But in terms of tea leaf tea, Earl Grey grapefruit chiffon cake, matcha flavored ice cream.
그러네요.
It's much more common, I think, nowadays to see these ingredients used as ingredients in sweets.
Yeah, whatever. How did that come to be? Earl Grey desserts and pastries?
It was just a thing. I think it wasn't just Korea at this time. I feel like this was a point where I think passion fruit made kind of its appearance on the global stage. It was one of those things that kind of became popular in the early 2010s, and it stuck around because it tastes really good.
Does it?
I like it.
I'm not really a big fan of Earl Grey in general.
I think it has to be Earl Grey grapefruit.
Oh, okay.
It has to be that
the combo. Yeah, that is true. But then again, Earl Grey, it tastes different when you have it in something. When you have it paired with as a pastry, it's different to the tea itself.
Yeah, because Earl Grey itself is a very strong tea.
It is.
It's very acidic, and it's flavored with bergamot, which is a type of citrus. And it's also a citrus that's used in a lot of perfumes. So if you don't like Earl Grey, it might be because it reminds you of like your Komo's perfume.
That's right. And it feels like you're eating cosmetics, something like that. But yeah, as you say, lots of tea ingredients are being more used in pastries and desserts more than the actual tea itself. But, for me, I just started drinking matcha lattes, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Sure.
I like the grainy texture.
Yeah, it's like, I think sometimes a grainy texture can be very, very enjoyable, right? Like matcha, you have misukaru.
맞아요.
What I was saying before, those French butter cookies. So the term for those French butter cookies is sable, which literally means sandy. Because when you bite into them, they kind of taste
crumble.
They crumble and turn a little grainy in a really pleasant sort of way.
맞아요. Yeah, texture is so important.
콩가루 on 떡.
Oh,
For
그러네요.
example, like that's a really great contrast in textures.
Very true. So that brings us to our question as we're talking about tea. 세계에서 차를 가장 많이 생산하는 나라는 어딜까요?
That's right. Which country produces the most tea in the world?
Let us know if you have your own guesses. In the meantime, here is Manhattan Transfer, Java Jive. Manhattan Transfer with Java Jive. We are talking about tea. All beverages, I think, start from tea. I would say so.
It is the most kind of like primordial form of beverage, right? Like what the other one would be like squeezing fruit from a juice from a fruit, but like back then, like fruits were so much more precious. You wouldn't really juice them. Yeah. I if you think about it, like beer is essentially wheat tea
that's
been left to go bad.
그래서 오늘의 question은 세계에서 차를 가장 많이 생산하는 나라는 과연 어디일까요?
That's right. Which country produces the most tea in the world?
중국일까요? 인도일까요? 아니면 somewhere totally random? Who knows?
Yeah, it could be, like one of the countries with one of the longest coastlines and highest population densities in the world is Indonesia, which also has a very strong tea culture.
That's very true. I mean, like, I'm thinking China, India, because I feel like they do drink a lot of tea there, but not necessarily will the people who drink a lot of tea produce the most amount of tea.
Sure. And, think about, like, in terms of, like, what types of teas are the most popular around the world, versus, like, what is the most popular tea? I would say, like, some form of black tea might be the most, but I don't have any numbers to back that up. It could be a green tea, honestly.
I mean,
I don't know enough about teas.
I feel like black tea, a lot of people use it in so many different ways. I like the chai we talked about before.
There are definitely far more big corporations that are making black tea products versus green tea products, I feel like. There's the big one, the one that starts with L, and the other one that starts with N.
Right.
And they make, ready-to-drink ones. And they have green tea products, but they're black tea products, especially like the peach-flavored ones and the lemon-flavored ones are the most popular. And then you have the entire tea culture of Europe. The most surprisingly, the most popular tea in Europe is English breakfast.
Okay.
We talked about this last week. We found out exactly what English breakfast means. To recap, it doesn't mean any one specific blend of tea, but rather it talks about a tea that's kind of just perfect for the breakfast time with adding a lot of dairy and sugar to it. It is the most popular tea across Europe. I did not expect that.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, it's the perfect blend. So whatever you're drinking, it probably 어울려서. It probably suits any palate.
That's right. And although Brits may be well known for being big tea drinkers and their tea, English breakfast, is the most popular in Europe, they don't drink the most tea in Europe. They are only third, as a matter of fact.
그래요?
Yeah. So Britain is third. Ireland takes the lead, which is interesting.
What?
But the top consumer is Turkey.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Just the size of the country and the tea culture there.
Right. Yeah, I mean Turkish tea also is quite popular as well. Don't they have the sand? Is that
that's
from
the
Turkey?
coffee?
Oh, that's
the coffee. Yeah, and that's really fun to watch. I feel like Turkish. What is it? Ice cream and coffee. They know how to have fun with their food.
Yeah.
They certainly know a thing or two about presentation.
Showmanship is where it's all at. In any case, teas all across the world, people like it very differently. But then again, you say that, coffee seemed like it was getting really popular. and then it died down a little bit?
Oh, no. So tea was popular and then it died.
Okay.
And then coffee kind of took its place. And we'll talk about coffee in the second half. But there was this period between the 16th century and the 20th century where leaf tea was on the decline in Korea.
Okay.
And then I think that's where we see, kind of the rise of traditional Korean non-tea teas.
Right. But then you can't forget about, like you said, iced tea.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of American culture,
It
too.
is an enormous part of American culture. As a matter of fact, Americans aren't tea drinkers at all, but there's a very strong culture of tea in the South in the form of sweet tea.
That's right.
Some people would be shocked to see how much sugar that goes in their sweet tea.
Add sugar to anything, and the Americans will love it.
A glass of sweet tea is around 22% sugar, more than cola.
Oh my gosh.
Do you like sweet tea?
It's a bit too sweet for me because I remember, we had the Arizona iced teas and things like that. And I would have them when I was younger, but even then I wasn't really into super sugary drinks because maybe I was too bougie back then too.
For me, I love sweet things, but in terms of beverages, I think I like bitter. I've always been a black coffee drinker.
Yeah.
I like bitter, and I used to drink my iced tea unsweetened because they used to sell it. They don't sell it anymore, which is a real shame. But they used to sell, the L company. They used to sell unsweetened iced tea, and I loved it.
Yeah, because I like to eat candy or sweets, but I don't want to drink it.
No.
It feels a little more fattening. But in any case, 22% sugar in sweet tea.
Yeah, it's interesting because
joke.
kind of similar to, the introduction of tea to Korea, part of the reason why it kind of took off so much is not because tea was expensive in the United States, because by that point, the United States, we're talking about colonial United States, colonized by the Brits and other Europeans. They were bringing tea with them. So tea was common. But what was not common was ice and sugar. And so before refrigeration became a thing, and before the Caribbean colonies were producing a lot of sugar to create the high amounts of sugar, again, only for the ultra rich, sweetened iced tea.
Okay.
And then once it kind of became more, once refrigeration happened, and then once sugar became more popular, it's okay, sweet tea for everybody.
Right.
And now it's become kind of part of the social, cultural fabric. And they know, people know it's not great for you. But the South is an area, and I feel like the southern regions of a lot of countries are like this.
Right.
There's a whole other story to unpack there. Why our southern regions tend to be more traditional and conservative. It is true though. You see this it's a phenomenon wherever you go, and as a result, sweet tea has kind of remained a cultural mainstay for well into the current day. Now big fast food chains serve sweet tea.
Right. Yeah. I had no idea that the Caribbean countries, the surrounding areas, had a big influence on sugar.
That's where a lot of it comes from, and it's not a pleasant story.
Oh, okay.
Bananas and sugar and
not the best. Maybe that's another episode for another
profits
day.
Before people sort of thing.
All right. Well, Indonesia also has their own, tea 문화.
That's right. So they also really, really love sweet teas. There's an Indonesian restaurant we like to go to, and if you pay with cash, they give you a free tea, and it's a little carton of tea, like a juice carton.
Those are the
juice
best.
Box. Those are great, and they're very, very sweet. And this was kind of a very Indonesian thing. There's a term for it, tebotol. It's bottled tea, and it's almost always sweet. But I found this article from 2018 where sugarless tea, sugar-free tea is now starting to become popular in Indonesia because of kind of health concerns.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, it feels like we've been drinking too much, and as we get a little more sophisticated, our palate should be as well.
That's right. So tebotol is kind of bottled tea, but that implies that it's sweet. So you have to ask for tebotol tawar, which means plain bottled tea.
I see. Yeah, you got to know the language to order correctly, too. Well, let's wrap it up with our answer for our question. 세계에서 차를 가장 많이 생산하는 나라는 과연 어디일까요?
That's right. Which country produces the most tea in the world?
Drumroll, please.
중국입니다. It is China. I told you not to overthink it.
그러네요.
Yep, don't overthink it.
Yeah, not so surprising. China, congratulations to those who got it right. I'm sure many of us might have guessed it. But then also, we also think like, oh, maybe it could be a random country.
I feel like I could probably overthink myself into thinking like South Africa or Venezuela.
Random could be. But in any case, thank you very much, Matt. Stick around. We still have much more coming up. We'll leave you guys with a quick song. Here is Broccoli. Broccoli 나오마죠. Okay. Sometimes the 띄어쓰기 in song titles, band names and things like that, it's just a little bit difficult. In any case, we do have a little bit of time left. The song title is 유자차, and I know we talked about this before as well, but 유자차, 대추차, these types of things, always best in the winter.
Yes.
But also, when you ice it, not bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It doesn't have quite the 상큼한 freshness of fresh fruit, but it does have like a really nice kind of jammy quality to it.
It does. One of my I told this before, but one of my friends does not like anything healthy. So if you say like, "Oh, I'm drinking tea," it is 유자차, so I guess I'm drinking healthy. But in any case, this one goes out to you. Broccoli 넘어져 with 유자차. Delicacies come from all around the world. Join us in our journey where we uncover these peculiar stories with our one and only Chef Matt in the studio for 맛대 맛. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
We're talking about beverages today. So many beverages around the world each have their own favorite kinds. But as we said, I feel like it all kind of comes down to the original tea. That's where everything kind of branches out.
That's right. And, it's just stuff in water for time. That's the most basic a beverage could get, right?
Yeah.
And now it's kind of turned into so many different things. But during the break, you brought up something that I think, were very remiss to not include. What was it again?
It's Thai iced tea.
Thai iced tea is so good.
오렌지 티 있잖아요. 태국 음식 타이 식당에 가보면 조금 비싸긴 하지만 you have to order the Thai iced tea if they have it freshly made. 그러면 더욱더 좋고요.
맞아요.
Nowadays they have like those cans ones.
It's not the same. It does have to be, because it is at the end of the day tea. It's tea from tea leaf. It's usually made from Assam black tea. And so the fresher it is, the better. And it also has all these spices in it and the yeonyu. I think I'm with you. Like we both agree that iced tea shouldn't be too sweet. But when you add dairy, though,
it's true.
Go as sweet as you want.
Yeah, actually, because some people do condensed milk, and I guess a lot of people do condensed milk. But I grew up where it was just plain milk, like tons of sugar,
sure,
but just plain milk. So I'm not really into condensed milk. I didn't grow up with it.
Because California does have a pretty strong Thai iced tea, because especially LA has a surprisingly large Thai community.
But also Vietnamese. So if you go to a Vietnamese restaurant, they just throw on the Thai iced tea on the menu.
Sure.
And so if you have pho, then you have Thai iced tea along with it, and it's so good.
맞아요. So genies, if you're listening, let's make it happen. Let's let's turn Thai iced tea into the trend of 2023.
Come on, you guys. That's right. All right, so enough with tea then. Let's head on over to our next topic.
That's right. If tea is the most consumed beverage in the world, coffee is number 2. But which country produces the most coffee in the world?
세계에서 가장 많이 커피를 생산하는 나라는 과연 어디일까요?
This one is a little trickier because I think coffee, especially because more than tea, you will see coffee with its kind of like origin names, much more like, Colombian coffee, Ethiopian coffee, Brazilian coffee, Vietnamese coffee. You will 구분, like you will distinguish between the different origins of coffee much more often than you will tea. Like you can get green teas that aren't grown in China, and China also grows a lot of and produces a lot of varieties of tea that you wouldn't necessarily associate with Chinese tea as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many as well. Even if you do, it's like, there's Indonesian, so there's like the Asia part, like Vietnam, and then there's, I don't know, every South American country you can think of. Colombia is always up there. Brazil. Who knows which country produces the most? But that's the question that we want to answer. But in any case, let's talk about coffee because it's so popular in Korea.
Got one right now.
What? See, that's the thing. In Korea, like 밤이어도 10시여도 커피 먹으러 갈래? 주문 받는 사람. It's like, does caffeine not like affect people?
Decaf.
Decaf.
저는 요새 starting from about 2 years ago, I started switching to decaf, like just coffee in the afternoons. Try to limit it to one day. It really doesn't have an effect on me. I've noticed, like, I don't think I'm getting any benefit from this. I might just switch back to just full caffeine because I'm not having any easier of a time sleeping.
Oh.
And I don't have any less energy either.
Right.
And I'm not any less jittery.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm just drinking too much coffee
In
to
general.
begin with. And that decaf isn't, I'm past the threshold
Could
already.
be. Yeah, but also you could be drinking a lot of caffeine in other things, which I didn't know was in juice.
Yeah. Caffeine is naturally present in a couple of other things, like chocolate has it has trace amounts of natural caffeine in it as well. So yeah, caffeine isn't just limited to coffee and tea.
Right. Yeah.
But here in Korea, it's coffee, and specifically, it is iced Americano.
아메리카노 좋아하잖아요.
Mm-hmm. And it is so deep that it actually made the international news.
Oh, did
I'm
it?
not kidding. Like earlier this year, February of 2023. So you know AP, like the newswire. So AFP, AP France, basically. They ran a headline saying, "Coffee so cold it's hot. South Korea's love of iced Americano." We made the news, everybody.
Oh, I like it. Coffee so cold, it's hot.
So they were very fascinated by the term 얼죽아.
그쵸.
You're familiar with this term.
Of course.
So it translated, it basically means that even if I die from freezing, it'll be an iced Americano.
That's right. Even if I freeze to death, 아를 주문하는 족.
That's right. Ice Americano. So they basically called iced Americano the nation's unofficial national drink.
It is.
Kind of like last week's question where we asked, how we talked about how champagne is the unofficial national drink of Monaco. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here.
It's the thing here. When you go to a cafe, so much so that if you order something else, 그냥 눈치를 봐야 돼요.
Sure.
카페를 가면 사람들이 주문을 받으면 다른 걸 시키면 조금 실망시키는 것 같기도 하고
Right.
왕따 시키는 것 같기도 하고.
You feel a little judged by the barista. It's like, I have to take that thing out from the refrigerator.
I know, yeah.
So let me ask you this. So you're not a big coffee drinker, but in terms
not.
of beverages, do you switch in the cold seasons? Do you switch to a hot beverage when it's cold, or do you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's different because I enjoy ice cream in the winter months, but that's very different because I don't have it every day.
Right.
But yeah, definitely, especially because I always get cold, so I love to have anything warm in my hands. 수중냉증도 있어가지고. It's poor blood circulation.
Sure.
I need a hot cup of joe or something in my hands.
Yeah, but in Korea, sales don't drop off in
They
the winter
don't.
time. Maybe it's a case of 이열치열.
Could be.
Yeah. It's essentially if we eat naengmyeon, if naengmyeon is technically a wintertime food, iced Americano is technically a wintertime beverage as well.
And now it's not even, 계절 menu. It's just all year round.
No, yeah, it is. It is by far the bestseller at these chain coffee shops. The average Korean drinks 353 cups of coffee per year, which doesn't sound like a lot because that's less than 1 cup a day, but that is double the global average.
Oh, wow.
That is double the global average.
No, yeah, it does seem like a lot to me. Wow. 353 cups per year. And I guess on average, there are people like me who don't drink anyway.
Sure.
But if we just take a look at coffee drinkers, I'm sure it would be so much more.
Right. And then you also have cultures where it's basically you're a coffee person or you're a tea person. So you have people who just flat out do not drink any coffee whatsoever, like a large percentage.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is that. So, okay, this article, essentially, they interviewed kind of 2 people, and I like one of these takes more than the other.
Okay.
So the first person said, like, we like it in Korea because 우리 그 빨리빨리 문화가 있어서, like, it's faster to drink. Okay, sure, that sounds a little basic to me. I do like this other opinion that one other person had, though, and it's because 한식은, like, we have like this really balance of very powerful flavors.
Uh-huh.
매운맛, 짠맛, 달콤한 맛. And 쓴맛, bitter flavor is a really big part of Korean cuisine. And I think on average, Koreans are much more tolerant and even really love bitter flavors more than the average. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I really like any 한방 음료 that they give. All the hanyak, all that stuff, I love it.
Yeah, and compared to that, iced Americano is mild.
Yeah.
But iced Americano is more bitter than hot Americano because, when something's cold, it reduces like the aroma and fragrance. So what you're left with is just the flavors rather than aroma.
Interesting.
And a big part of that is the bitterness. So you don't have like the aroma to kind of balance it out. And I think that bitterness is kind of effective in waking you up a little bit.
Yeah. And I guess that does still make sense with the 빠리빠리 culture as well. Who has time to like 호호 불면서 그게 여유이잖아요. 뜨거운 음료 상징하는 게 여유.
Sure.
느긋한 아침. Nobody's got time for like a cozy morning. Everyone's in a hurry.
That's right. Like, so if you actually see most people who bring their own like tumbler, like their own cane cup, to the cafe, and they ask for a hot drink. They'll generally ask, "Oh, can you put an ice cube in that?" Just so it's drinkable temperature right away.
Oh, yeah. Because nobody's got time for hot beverages.
So S Company, one of the world's biggest coffee chains, says iced drinks accounted for 76% of its sales over the entire year. And that only goes down to 60% in the wintertime.
Oh,
so
okay.
it is still more than the majority of sales come from iced beverages.
Yeah, I mean, in Korea, if we're talking about the 별다방, it's strange because in the States, it's all about the caramel macchiatos,
Oat milk,
frappes, these really fancy, very sugary,
pink drink,
seasonal drinks. Yeah, all those types of things. But in Korea, it's just pretty, standard is the iced Americano.
No nonsense.
Yeah.
The Kajun menu here is very small comparatively, I feel
very
like.
true.
To some other countries.
And I wonder how that actually happened. I mean, coffee in general in Korea, like you said, it was the tea culture.
Yeah, that's right. And again, one of those things. So it came in the 16th century and was only tasted by a very select few. And then towards the end of the 19th century is when it started to become more popular. During this time, one of the second and the second to last and the last emperors of Korea. So Emperor Sunjong and Gojong were both like coffee fans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and in general they were kind of pro-Western was leaders.
Interesting.
And to the point where so Emperor Gojong was said to like have had coffee on one of his last days on Earth.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and then it slowly started to become more and more available, and then essentially during the occupation period. When a lot of coffee was coming through via the American military, that's when coffee shops started to become commonplace.
I see.
And so by 1959, there were 3,000 coffee shops all over Korea. A third of those were in Seoul. And the next step, though, 1976, that was the year Koreans invented mix.
Aha.
We didn't invent instant coffee, but we did invent was the little stick packet that included the creamer and the sugar.
That's right.
And that, that essentially, that's what kind of took it from being something whatever to being something really special.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, that's what I kind of grew up with too. When I was a kid, I don't know why I liked to mix coffee. Probably because it's super
sweet and creamy. Yeah. It's sweet and creamy. Yeah, there was like a mix coffee 기계, right? Like the old school coffee dispensers. There was one in my elementary school.
Oh, that is what I miss at the subway stations.
Sure.
겨울에는 지하철에 가면은 그 vending machine이 있잖아요.
자판기,
yeah, 그 자판기. Sometimes obviously they have like hot chocolate as well.
그렇게 그러면요 군대 갔다 오세요. Then you can have your fair share of the coffee there. So we had the development of mixed coffee in 1976. And then 1997 happens, the IMF crisis. And that's when we saw this enormous explosion in the sales of instant coffee because it is just so affordable.
Okay, yeah.
And at this point, there was a window in time where Korea became the largest consumer of instant coffee in the world.
Wow, at that time, 90년대부터요?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was a relatively new phenomenon that we're, getting more and more popular and getting more and more fancy with the baristas and things like that. But I guess it started thanks to the IMF crisis back in the 90s. So there's like things people say like waves of coffee.
Yes.
And maybe we'll get to that in just a bit. Let's take a quick song break first. Here's 10cm with Americano. Americano 10cm. Korea's the only place that will dedicate an entire song to their favorite drink. And that's why it's probably our national drink, unofficially.
I'm curious if there's anyone out there who takes their iced Americano black but with sugar.
Oh. Or
black
usually,
with sugar. So no cream, no dairy.
Maybe. It's not with sugar. People put syrup in it. No?
Yeah, so syrup. Like a sweetened but dairy-free. Curious.
It doesn't seem right.
Doesn't seem right, does it?
It doesn't, no. PD님께서 커피 믹스는 다방 커피를 편하게 타기 위해서 만들어졌다고 볼 수 있는데요.
Sure.
다방 커피 equals 커피 2개, 설탕 2개, 크림 or 프림 2개. So it's like the perfect rate or like the equal amount of ratio. 믹스 커피 타고 봉지를 스푼처럼 전후문화는 안 좋다고 하는데요. We all do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to dirty a spoon.
Yeah. 아니 굳이 and then you gotta get a stick or a spoon. Just 빨아먹는 것도 재미있잖아요. 항공 호르몬이 나온다고 하는데 yeah, I mean, that's why we don't want to, microwave our Tupperwares and things like that.
There's microplastics in everything. We're doomed anyway.
Yeah.
Might as well live life a little bit more conveniently until that point.
All right, talking about coffee. 커피를 세계에서 가장 많이 생산하는 곳은 어딜까요?
That's right. Which country produces the most coffee in the world?
Okay, let's head on over to Europe.
That's right. So let's talk about Dutch coffee.
Okay.
So Dutch coffee is a type of iced cold coffee.
That was big for a while.
Yeah, it was really big for a while. And what's interesting in that is that it's basically big in 3 places. It's big in the Netherlands and Korea and Japan. It's interesting that you almost never see Dutch coffee in the United States.
Oh, but maybe because because they call it differently?
No, it is a specific process. So, do you ever walk into like a third wave coffee shop and see the glass contraption?
Science experiments?
Yeah, it has to be like done in that contraption.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So basically what's happening is that Dutch coffee, instead of just regular cold brew is essentially like tea. You let it sit there for 12 to 24 hours. Dutch coffee, you're dripping drops of water onto the coffee drop by drop.
So it's not like hand drip then.
No, it's not hand brewed. No. Hand poured coffee. That only takes a few minutes, and so you're taking and you're doing that cup by cup.
Right.
With Dutch coffee, you're making like a big batch of maybe like 12 to 20 servings at a time.
But drop by drop.
Drop by drop.
How long does that usually last? Or take
3.5 to 12 hours. So it's faster than cold brew. Again, you basically infuse the coffee directly into the big bucket of water.
Okay.
And that takes 12 to 24 hours.
Okay.
So these third wave coffee places, some will prefer one over the other. And just a little side note, third wave coffee essentially is like specialty coffee, small keinkage, where they're doing like, really specialized coffees where they're roasting in-house maybe, and then you can order, different beans, and they'll switch out their varieties every week. Second wave coffee is like the big coffee chains, the big boom that happened in the 90s.
All right.
And then first wave coffee essentially refers to anything before that.
Okay.
We don't really bother to distinguish.
Makes sense.
So that's why you'll hear the term third wave now being used for other things once things kind of like enter into the more specialized realm, right? Like, anytime where something becomes so ubiquitous that small little niches appear,
right?
Outside the mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, some people take roasting super seriously.
They really do. I worked for a coffee roaster back in the day, and it was a really kind of eye-opening how much love and care could possibly go into a single cup of coffee. And,
It's strange because if you see the coffee bean, it's like green.
Yep, it starts off as a green bean.
And then you roast it, I don't know, like perfectly or whatever. And then you've got all these different notes, like wine.
So one place where you'll see this roasting happening very frequently are in households in Ethiopia and Eritrea.
Households.
Have you seen this? So this is something I think has just gone viral recently. An Ethiopian woman in Korea is basically bringing the coffee ceremony culture to her family here, where she roasts coffee fresh every single morning for her family, grinds it up, and brews it fresh in the traditional Ethiopian way. And that essentially is the way in the Ethiopian and Eritrean regions where they grow coffee. That's how they do it, like, the traditional way.
This is like 한국 국밥 문화.
Yeah.
아침 식사를 차려주는.
It is, it's a lot of love and care that goes into providing this thing for your family, friends, and guests. And so they have a store of green beans. And just like pop, they'll wash the beans underwater every day. And then they'll roast it over a low heat in a pan that's got all these little holes in it.
Sure.
Over a fire. And once the coffee's all roasted, they'll grind it. And they'll sieve it. They have a grinder, and they have this like little like 돗자리, like kind of hanging like little mat.
Right.
It's a straw sieve, and that's what they use to kind of sieve out all the pieces of husk that are in there.
Right.
Grind it by hand, and then
grind it by hand.
Oh, sorry. They'll grind it and sort it by hand.
Okay.
But they would grind it by hand traditionally.
I guess so, yeah.
Nowadays they use
grinder.
electric grinders, but traditionally pre-electric grinders they grind it by hand,
oh my gosh.
and then they boil it in a teapot sort of it looks like a teapot essentially. It's not like a bielati. It's not like a specialized thing. It is basically just a pot full of water. And they put the coffee in there, boil it for about 5 minutes. They'll take out the first layer, put it back in to make sure it's all emulsified. It's a pretty complicated process.
Tedious. Indeed.
And then they'll have all the grinds in there, and then they'll all sit, and one person will pour. They'll drink, and they have different names for the first, second, and third brews. They'll use the same beans to brew several times.
Well, there you go. I mean, lots of different ways to drink coffee. Ethiopian culture is pretty intense. Is that a hint to the question? 커피를 세계에서 가장 많이 생산하는 곳은 과연 어디일까요?
That's right. Which country produces the most coffee in the world?
Drum roll, please.
Brazil.
Brazil.
That's why Frank Sinatra sang about it. They make an awful lot of coffee in
Do
Brazil.
they?
They do.
Frank Sinatra 어떤 곡이었어요?
They make an awful lot of coffee in Brazil.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I'm no Frank Sinatra, but it's a very catchy tune. Brazil produces the most coffee in the world. Vietnam is catching up though. So Vietnam was they've made a lot of investment into their infrastructure in growing coffee, and their coffee growing capabilities are growing very, very rapidly.
Well, there you go. I mean, you can enjoy coffee anywhere around the world, but it's interesting to know that Brazil takes number one. In any case, 덕분에 너무 많은 것을 배워봤습니다. Thank you once again. Learned lots, had a lot of fun. Matthew, we'll see you again next week.
See you then.
We'll leave you guys with that note. Have a great night. Stay safe and sound, and we'll see you again tomorrow. 여러분, 내일 봬요.